All right, everyone, thanks for joining Infinite Plane Saturn Day, 9/2/2023. And you just heard Chief Crow, Auto Hoax, or GTFO. And yeah, he was indeed chanting Storm Antarctica. I mean, there is a storm coming, and it's not a bunch of MAGAs clamoring around the Capitol. No, it's the mass globe exodus as people figure out that Antarctica is the biggest hoax of all. And it's nothing, just free resources, free for all, head deep south, deep, deep south, beyond the so called Antarctic continent, and we'll see. But until a bunch of people get up and go in a bunch of different directions at once, all 180 degrees from the center, we won't know. You can no longer use the excuse that the Marines will shoot you. I think that's probably a lie. Has anybody checked on some of the flat earth conferences lately? Because I think there's one coming up in October, and I'm wondering if they're going to address the Antarctica question. The next conference is in Las Vegas, by the way. I just got word it's at a hotel. I believe they have some slot machines. And it is going to feature the music of Chief Crow. So I will be promoting that and that event. And, I might be able to attend. I'm not really sure. I think that a couple of our reporters will certainly go for review purposes, but I think it'd be really important to see where it's at. Where is this conversation? Where are people at with the question? Because it's not going to go away no matter how much they censor it. And one of the points I made to the producer of this documentary that's going to be recording here on Monday is that, because she said, how many people do you think are flat earthers? And I said, you know what, you're going to find many, many more people who are globe skeptics than you'll ever find, quote, flat earthers. And this is because these are two different positions. They really are. One of them is more of a skeptic, and the other is more of an alternative belief system that they have adopted. So one is a skeptic's position, like I'm just agnostic until I can trust everything, but I'm just kind of questioning it, not making a claim yet until I get more info means I'm merely suspending judgment. But to affirm I am this is to say, oh, I believe it. I have some kind of information that I'm convinced of. And that's fine for some, but when you really get down to it, it's like if you can't really verify it, or if you're not willing to even go out and test it, you can't get mad if nobody takes it seriously. The only reason why the topic isn't talked about as much these days is it hasn't gone anywhere. Like, quite literally, it hasn't gone anywhere. It's more or less been grounded. And it seemed like the big distraction of 2020 steered a lot of those people back into geopolitics, globe politics in particular. And global politics, when I say geopolitics, we're talking about a closed system that implies that it is in fact a globe, and geopolitics as they play it in the world today only makes sense in their system. So why would you participate if you're saying the thing is fake? Because it is predicated on the existence of many things that are fake. And we're not just talking about the big picture, but take nukes for example. You're going to vote for political leadership that operates on the presupposition that they have this power to blow up the other people on a whim, that they have everybody else held hostage, and that we're just lucky to have been born in the country with the biggest hostage taker with the best arsenal. Like, it's absurd. All right, joined by G33, Diana South, Frank Murr, Phase Polarizer, Portal Complex, Dwayne Garrett, Configuration Manager. He says, is it a Robbie Davidson conference? No, Robbie Davidson jumped off the edge of the earth after that last conference he was at, where he invited Jimmy Kimmel's guys over, and the guy named Jake Bird, who had a cast on his leg, got caught groping some woman, and before she could call the cops, Robbie Davidson stopped her, and then their own security stopped Robbie Davidson from stopping her from filing a report, and then Robbie ran, and nobody's seen him since. But if he had any self-respect and decency, he would have ran after that embarrassing performance of Lean Flat, where they rapped over the Lean Back song to Lean Flat. Is choreographed. It's as bad as it sounds. All right, Jennifer Reeves has joined us from YouTube. Okay, we have a good crowd here. David Hoaxme and Diana South join us from D Live. I love D Live, but they don't love us. They banned us and destroyed our channels for a period of time, refused to pay, but eventually they kind of just let us fade into the background. They let us use their app, but I don't really endorse them. But as long as we have people who use that platform, we will broadcast there. We are aiming for ubiquity. We're going to be broadcasting on all platforms eventually anyway. Okay, so let's get back on open topics. There's so many things to cover. There's been a resurgence of all these fake, I guess, Fed groups, Fed pride parades, Patriot Front, Nazis in Florida. Laura Loomer, who's cozying up to Trump and opposing MTG. It's like she's probably trying to become the vice president, to be honest. Laura Loomer actually went and confronted the Goyim Defense League in Florida and a bunch of Nazis, and they called her a bunch of names. And I'm hoping she's getting those clicks that she needs to get her Twitter account monetization up a bit higher, because that's clearly what she's after. I wouldn't be surprised if all of those Nazis in Florida aren't paid by someone connected to Trump, because they're saying we had these Nazis. Well, you think they're Nazis because they have these obvious labels. They're just so cartoonish. And one of them screams at the camera, "We are all Ron DeSantis supporters." I'm like, okay, I wonder who's paying his crisis actor pay. And the guy who runs the thing, Goyim Defense League, he's clearly controlled opposition, and I called him out a while ago as a groomer. He was kind of doing the Alex Stein thing. You know how Alex Stein dresses as the opponents he's ridiculing and he goes to city council? Well, the guy from the Nazi Goyim Defense League thing, he dressed up as a groomer and did these online videos where he was saying adult things to children in order to make a point. Kind of like Alex Stein wearing a bikini and going to these swimming parks. Just absurdism. I don't know what you want to call it, political theater, pose, the parody of extremism. But they take it to such a degree that I start to wonder, is it even parody at this point? Like, is there a point where you can mimic something or mock something to a degree to which you're inseparable from the real thing in actuality? But anyhow, it's a clown show, and they're all paid, I'm pretty sure. Their uniforms look new, and they just look like WWF characters. In fact, I have a tweet here. If you just want to, let's just go ahead and start with that. I have a tweet here where you hear some of these individuals talking about how much they love missiles being sent to Ukraine, and they're wearing these massive swastikas. And the guy in the back has these tattoos all over his head, and he looks like an orc. And my point being, this guy speaks like Randy Savage, the World Wrestling Entertainment Macho Man character. That's the kind of acting we're being treated to here. So this might even be a foreshadowing of what's to come. Maybe they're upping their game with the theatrics. Again, this is from Florida, and these individuals are posing as Ron DeSantis voters. And if you're not watching, if you're just listening, you could just picture a bunch of orcs with swastikas. And this guy can't hide his grin, by the way, if you're watching. He's grinning big.
In support of Ukraine, you mean?
Hell Ukraine, hell Asia. Biden's better than Trump because he sends rockets to Ukraine.
Now, if the volume's kind of low, it's their fault.
Support of Ukraine,
But
mean?
yeah, these people can hardly keep in character as they're talking about missiles to Ukraine. They're literally out here chanting that they're Ron DeSantis supporters. Here's a guy who actually says it.
We're all DeSantis supporters. Woo! We're all DeSantis supporters. Woo!
We're all DeSantis supporters.
We're all DeSantis
Now, I have to say,
Woo! That we all need.
that makes no sense, because if you were truly a Ron DeSantis supporter, you would know the terrible optics that you're presenting by wearing death heads, Nazi emblems. And this is a different group. This is the GDL. This is a different group than the one with the swastikas, but they're all color coordinated. And that's also interesting. Okay, continuing. This is a clip from Alex Jones and General Flynn talking about how they can't sleep at night. They're full of nervous energy. And I think this is just kind of what they do. It's a vibe they create intentionally. They want you to think that to be awake is to be agitated and ready to take action. And you might think that I'm lazy about this stuff or apathetic, but I'm an inactivist. I don't believe in activism. I think that the only winning move is not to play, that it's a losing game. This is definitely a two-pronged psyop, and you can't just choose a side and think you're going to win. The political horseshoe theory is real, but the only escape is the off-world stage. But listen to what they present here, because this is the point. This is General Flynn and Alex Jones.
Say, a weakness of mine is anxiety. I get anxious sometimes. I'll wake up like I woke up this morning at about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I started reading and
me
writing.
too. I woke
and
up at
getting on the phone.
3:15 and was just, because I don't have the anxiety during the day. I wake up because my brain's working while I'm asleep. I went to bed about 10. I woke up at 3, and I was like, I've got to do something.
There's a sense of urgency that we all need, and
Now, they're just talking about the sense of urgency that they need, that it is so pronounced in them, these leading truthers, that they can't sleep at night. It wakes them up. And this should have you questioning, well, how come I'm not troubled by the state of the world at 3 a.m.? Maybe I'm not fighting hard enough. Maybe I need to get a spear and some bullhorns, and I need to go charge into the Capitol, take some action. And I think this is sort of just a bluff. I don't think they really wake up in the middle of the night. I think they sleep very well with My Pillow. And they probably get proceeds from Mike Lindell's company. They all have their coupon codes. But they're trying to portray themselves as nervous wrecks. Why would they do that? Well, it's a selling point. I really think it's a selling point. It's almost a way of virtue signaling. Like, I couldn't sleep last night because I care so much about those missing kids from Maui. Because I'm so troubled by what Sound of Freedom was about. I watched it 3 times last night because I just stayed up last night fighting child trafficking by watching that Tim Ballard movie. Well, that's virtue signaling. I don't think it's true. I don't think these guys are literally nervous wrecks. They both wake up at 3 a.m. Give me a break. And Alex Jones actually overtalked him. So Flynn was saying, I woke up at 3, and Jones was like, me too, and kind of ran over him on purpose because I don't think he wanted to be one-upped. He's like, no, I haven't slept in 6 months. And that's how they roll, because it's a contest. Okay, here's a clip of the DeSantis supporters with these nice, new, fresh out of the package Nazi flags. There's something just cartoonish about all these characters. It's just the bright colors. These shirts aren't faded. They haven't been wearing these shirts and sporting this ideology for long. It probably was just like literally taken out of the package. These flags all came from the same place, obviously, but this group matches the Goyim Defense League, but they're 2 different groups I want to emphasize. These are the only people wearing masks in Florida. Like, these people are opposed to wearing masks, but then they will wear masks for this. And it's kind of interesting. What is the issue here? And there's something else, too. I looked at one of their posters, and it had a blood drop on it. And the blood purity thing actually correlates or relates to the pure blood versus goo blood, vaxxed versus unvaxxed, or the saved versus unsaved. And when you get into the origin of quarantine and the meaning of 40 days and the temptation of Christ in the desert, the hiding from sin, the asceticism of it all, but the separation, the segregation, the quarantine, the purity, the pure versus the unpure, it's all the same program. It's groupthink, and it's this hive mind. And I think it's notable that they cover their faces because it kind of turns them all into insects in that way. It's a denial of their individuality. Now here is Mike Flynn talking about the upcoming, quote, Black Swan. Now, I've been hearing more and more about this Black Swan. So a Black Swan event is basically what we call a 9/11 event, a major league transformative psyop. These things are always fake. But individuals like Flynn at his level of security clearance would know when the big fake things are coming. And one of the things I've noticed here, and this is a big pattern, I listen to a number of individuals talking about Trump being the Antichrist and he's going to get some kind of a head wound, etc. And you can find a lot in the predictive programming to substantiate this. But the pattern is they take the predictive programming clues. Instead of saying, hey, look, they're going to fake it very soon, they say it's going to happen very soon. And they treat it as though it's real and that it's going to be real, that this is like something that's prophetic. And I'm saying, no, predictive programming is not prophecy. If you're saying that predictive programming is therefore from God, then you are absolving the writers of the programming from responsibility. It's a way to cover up the metascriptors. The psychological operations, the big ones, the 9/11 like events, do require a lot of human operators. This isn't something that is just made up on the whim. It's actually indicative of an infrastructure that's so monolithic that it's probably impossible for most people to believe that media can be that centralized. It's easier to understand it once you understand how fake moon landings are, and you're like, okay, well, if they're faking space and they're all part of the International Space Station, then maybe the control is a bit more monolithic. Maybe it is already global mind control. It's synchronized at that level. And my point being, if it's organized at this level, if these scripts are actually integrated into every nation in a certain way so they all collaborate on the big psyops as we can demonstrate, then we should be able to identify, or at least as we do here, shine a light on the infrastructure of this media, this monolithic media. But instead, people will say that this predictive programming is God or it's prophecy or something, and when it happens, they'll treat it as real. They won't even include in their assessment it could be a hoax, and that's just very misleading. These various religious explanations for psyops are very good at hiding the essential fact that if you spiritualize it, again, you're distracting from the actual producers of the event. False flag theory does the same exact thing. It's kind of the same thing. A false flag theory, which says this event was done by, let's say, a second shooter, it implies that the event was real. And now we're just kind of arguing over the cause. But the essential thing is the ruse kind of gets past your filter if you just accept that it actually happened. So what I'm saying here is that for all the predictive programming about some upcoming event with Trump, there is no reason to think it's going to be real. And if you treat it as though it's real from day one, then you've been clowned by the clown world. You've been duped. And there's no reason to be duped in 2023. There's enough information out there to understand how this stuff works. How there's the essential levels of fakery, there's the alternative fakery, and then there's the banned concepts of most of it's faked on a big scale. Okay, catching up on some comments. Tomanoid3 says, what are you, some kind of optimist? Yeah, well, we were born in a doomsday cult. And this is not an exaggeration, it's not hyperbole. If you believe in the conventional science, you actually believe Maui was caused by capitalism, by you refusing to recycle. You're driving too much. Your carbon footprint is just getting so big. You're breathing so much. There's too many people breathing too much, and it's causing Gaia to have these responses. And so, yeah, Maui got burned. Yeah, that's a doomsday type culty belief. It's not science. It's actually a rehashing of the more archaic flood myths or the punishing gods. You know, give the volcano god your best crops and some virgins, or it'll spill lava on your village. It's the same thing. Or and I don't even know if these stories are true, but the accounts of sacrifices to keep the sun from dying during the eclipse or whatever it was said to be for. All right, thank you, Nicotramus. He says, keep spitting truth, Tim. This is the only outlet we have. Yeah, this is an open source platform, open source illumination, as opposed to the closed system that presumes that they have all the answers. The only reason why we get anywhere here is that we're open to new viewpoints and to information that comes from outside of really any box. Everything is so boxed in these days. And it's so compartmentalized, people can't see how they're puppeteered by the same hands. Like, I'll point out that the blue pill reality is a dream world, and the red pill is produced by the same pharmaceutical company that makes the blue pill. And the red versus blue dialectic is actually fake. That the red pill is the false awakening. That the red pill is the alternative explanation for the people who see too much. So they're correct. The red pill, the conspiracy theorists, they are correct. They are being lied to. But their methodology is wrong. They say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Well, their intentions are great. Let's figure out what's really going on and save the world. Like, what's wrong with that? But just like wokeism, the wokies think the same thing of themselves that the red pills do of themselves. They think, oh, we found out the truth, and we're going to wake everybody up to it. So you have the woke and the red pill, left and right, trying to wake up the majority of sleepers who are enjoying their dream. They're enjoying their apathy, and they kind of resent your attempts to wake them up. But both of them are deceived. They're caught up in the political horseshoe. Both fringes are steered away from the edge of the world stage. They're steered away from seeing it objectively, and they're put into activism. And they begin to resemble one another. Can you tell a difference between Antifa and the Nazis that we just saw on parade? I can't. They're essentially the same thing. What's the difference between a Proud Boy and a soy boy? There is no difference. And they're both clamoring for favor from daddy government. I mean, it's actually kind of sad. It's arrested emotional development on full display. Bunch of children. So my point being, and actually I want to point out in Florida, by the way, if you're out there, it's legal to run over protesters. Not that I'm saying you should, but I think it is, isn't it? I should double check that before I'm pretty sure they legalized it. Anyway, let's move on. That was just a flashback from 2020. I was thinking about the peaceful protest. Oh yeah, GOP bill targets protesters and absolves motorists who strike and injure protesters. And this may become increasingly relevant as the environmentalists become increasingly radical. In fact, there's a video making the rounds of these environmentalists who actually blocked the way in to Burning Man. And then you had the Nevada police come in and knock down their barricade and drag them out of the way. And a lot of people were actually applauding this. They were saying, good for you guys. You're finally taking this seriously. This is as a form of terrorism because people could be dying in these long lines, these traffic jams, intense heat, lack of ability to, maneuver. They're just stuck. It's actually kind of destructive. But I was kind of thinking maybe they should have left the barrier up. Would anybody here actually care if the people at Burning Man just kind of stayed there? Let them just have their own breakaway civilization. Let them manifest their paradise. No, they want to come back. Anyway, they're out there having these open air orgies, which I don't have a problem with. I really don't. I don't care what people do. It's no different than the Bohemian Grove. Like, we're presumably talking about consensual things, adults being gross in the desert, do your thing, whatever. But my point of it is, you're the same ones who were total COVIDiots just a few years ago. They actually shut down the Burning Man because of the thing, and now they're acting like there's no such thing as disease or anything. They're just, and it's almost kind of, I think it's on brand, I'll say, that they would be doing this because I think it represents the ultimate dissolution of boundaries. And if you think about it, this is very much Brave New World, about how everybody belongs to everybody. So you couldn't even opt out of these communal events. And it's really about collectivism taken to its extreme. But the open boundaries actually correlates to their general world view about open borders, about the open porous skin, that there should be this lack of defense for the individual. The idea of the correlation between the needle and the wall is kind of fascinating in this regard because you'll notice the anti-vax are pro build the wall. And why is that? It's because of boundaries. The skin is a boundary. The wall is a boundary. Your front door is a boundary, which you defend with your Second Amendment, which the people who are for the open borders are also against. So the gun grabbers are the pro-vaxxers, are the open borders, are the orgy and the desert people. Makes perfect sense. It ultimately is about their relationship to big government. Thank you again, Nicotramus, and I'm going to have to add the Godzilla noise back in there. I'll do that today. Portal Complex says, yo, IPS, Burning Man this year got flooded. Fires out 100%. Interesting, Burning Man got flooded. I heard it was a mud flood. Wasn't that the case? Wasn't it a mud flood? Where it was just a... Let me see. And which one is this? Like the 34th or 35th? They had 33 consecutive Burning Man festivals. And then they were shut down. At the final one, a 33-year-old there died. And that's when I started paying attention to it. They're in Black Rock City. Very significant name. You'll find the correlations in their symbolism with Black Rock, Phoenix, Burning Man. It's all connected. Yeah, here we go. Burning Man attendees told to shelter in place after rain turns Nevada site into muddy, flooded mess. Flash flood hits Burning Man festival and turns into mud bath. So who do we blame for this? Do we blame climate change or their iniquity? They're being wicked in the desert, and God told us with Noah, hey, this is going to cause a flood. Or was it because of their RVs and their carbon footprints as they migrated out into the desert? Either way, they brought it on themselves, we can say, whether it was done by God or Gaia. Okay, continuing. Let's move through my notes. Go to minds.com. I want to say thanks to Javo82. He had purchased some art and framed it and shared a picture in our Discord server. This is an original Penguinotti. Looks like, I'd say 11 by 14, perhaps 9 by 12 inch acrylic on canvas. Portal says, I blame the desert for not being tiled. Look, I've never been out there. I'm curious about Burning Man. I think it's an interesting event. I don't mean to knock the event and the people there. I hope they get out alive. Okay, moving on. Now, I've been thinking, let me bring this up. I've been thinking about the power of the nuclear bomb hoax. Because if you'll notice, many of the big truther channels believe in these things. They're scared. That's why they can't sleep at night. In fact, they believe in worse things than just that. I mean, General Flynn has told people in confidence, in private, you have to pay him for him to tell you this, that there will be EMPs that will cause heads to explode in those who have been boosted enough times. But I've been thinking that those who kneel to the power of this fictional weapon of mass destruction are actually kneeling to their god. This mushroom cloud god is actually the same thing as the god of the obelisk. No different than those who praise the flying obelisks, who still believe in this outer space, like allegory. I mean, I think space travel is allegory for higher states of consciousness. I think it's fake. But I'm saying the people who think that space travel is real and who look up at the rockets and basically worship these things, that's a flying obelisk. So if you are praying to a flying obelisk, or you are kneeling to a mushroom cloud, cowering in fear, ducking and covering, you are actually on Team NWO. Like, there's no way you can consider yourself to be a quote truther. And the reason why is that your fear actually makes you a liability. The fact that you fear these things makes you fall for, makes you a dupe. It basically turns you into a dupe for this clown world scenario where we are all being held hostage to these cartoonish villains with the ultimate power to push a button and blow somebody else up. You know, Putin, North Korea. We have all these different people out there, these madmen who are just ready to blow it all up. It's like, sorry, this doesn't exist this way, but our entire political system is actually more or less built around the assumption that this is a possibility. Joined by Pippi Langstruff, says 44 and 33. Osher is here. McDirty Work is here from D Live. Elephant Tusk says Penguin Lives Matter. Well, yeah, I concur. Okay, now listen to this. This is actually getting specific. I mentioned General Flynn, and he's talking about this Black Swan event. Let me get back to that really quick. The Black Swan events he's talking about, 9/11 style events. He's starting to say, and the reason why I pay attention to General Flynn is that he is pretty much responsible for the Q movement, for the J6, January 6th insurrection. He's one of the ringleaders, and he's given a platform at all the different conservative events. And when he says something like this, there's going to be a Black Swan event, it's worth paying attention to. So let's go ahead and play this clip.
Why? Why do they want the United States of America? They want the United States of America for one thing, and that's resources, right? Resources, energy, food, and people that we have, the innovation and the innovative people that we have. I mean, if they could, China would turn the United States of America into a slave.
Okay, well, the whole thing is about China becoming so powerful it turns us into a slave state. But here's what he says. He says, I think we're going to see a cyber attack, cyber disruption that's so vast it will disrupt the entire internet. That's what he's saying. Now, how long have they been saying this? Well, since 2016. In fact, they hope for it. The Q crowd actually hopes for this to happen. They're expecting it. They believe that there should be a 10-day disruption of the internet that will involve a great reset of their own, their great awakening. And I want to point out that on October the 4th, there's going to be this nationwide emergency broadcast alert that we're all going to get, and a lot of them are looking forward to it. But here's where he gets specific. He says, I actually think we're going to see a disruption so vast that it's going to break the entire internet. Like, what does he know? Nicotrama says, too late, General Flynn, we're already a slave state. Good point. When someone says the New World Order's coming and they're going to give us a new religion, one world government, I'm like, where have you been? It's like, you were born into it. It pre-exists us. It's not coming. It's already here. They're just updating the nomenclature at the moment. They're changing a few things, but it's already here. Okay, look at this. More martyrdom stories. This is all connected to the martyrdom of Trump. And these are all coming out right now. And people are noticing the hypocrisy between the treatment of BLM rioters and the J6 protesters. J6 protesters arrested, facing charges and charged 3,800. Black Lives Matter rioters, 350. Now, I happen to think it's because most of the rioters were probably agitators that were federal informants or police. But whatever the case, they've made this disparity pretty evident. Proud Boy claims, quote, Trump won after sobbing for mercy, and he gets a 10-year sentence. What's his name? Joe Biggs, who used to be a host on InfoWars, got 17 years, which is like a Q dog whistle. And I think the Proud Boy guy got 33. Leader of the Proud Boys? I mean, these numbers are always just kind of giving you a clue, but the Proud Boy leader was obviously a federal informant. I think they even admitted this before. But just look at these. These are all meant to be infuriating facts. You're supposed to hear this and get outraged. A Justice Department seeks 33 years in prison for Enrique Tarrio, the former Proud Boy. So he gets 33. But this guy sobbed and he said Trump won, so he didn't even back down from his claim. But this is creating a lot of outrage on the right, just something to note here. Then there was this. We've been talking about this Trump thing, and this is worth noting because in the White House press room, there is the head of Donald Trump high up on a shelf. And by all indications here, it has been beaten on one side of the head. This is in the White House. This is from flagandcross.com. White House press room contains figurine of what appears to be Trump's head beaten up. A video posted by Greg Price of Parabellum shows what appears to be a bust of Donald Trump high on a shelf in the briefing room. And they look closer, and it's bruised. What is it? It says there's no explanation of how it got there. But The image of a former president beaten and bruised, disrespectfully thrown on a shelf in the White House where he once lived is somewhat shameful. One ex-user tweeted, "Wow, sick freaks. Looks like somebody in the briefing room needed a stress relief toy. Went for a Trump head." So this is kind of intriguing, because what it says here is, I don't think this is unintentional. It communicates to people that this is out there, that this is something that there may be even political will for, as disturbing as that is. I don't think it's a coincidence. But I'm also connecting it to the bigger story of this head wound narrative. And let me point this out. One of the dominant headlines on Drudge for a few days has been Tucker Carlson, who has been talking about this. We're speeding towards Trump assassination. This is Tucker Carlson saying this stuff. In fact, Tucker said it to Trump during his interview. He's like, first they indicted you, now they're trying to jail you, what's next? So they're putting it out there. And the reason they put it out there is to make it believable when it happens, but it's not going to be real. We had a discussion in the Discord server about this where someone was like, why are you giving this attention? Why are you even paying attention to it? I'm like, well, because it's fake. I'm not going to be bowled over by a lack of information when something major happens. I'm deconstructing the psyop in advance. And so I made this graphic, which it's a little crude at the moment, but this is going to serve as the basis for a poster that I've been kind of working on, where it has a stick figure here with his face up against a screen. Next to him is a figure with his face through the screen, and the third figure is the world they perceive through the screen is labeled as augmented. My point here, though, is that the one in the middle with his head through the screen is even deeper into this media matrix and further from the real world. And that happens to be the conspiracy theorist, which is kind of paradoxical. You'd think, oh, they're closer to the truth because they're digging deeper. No, they actually fell into a hole. Now they're on the right path because they're not trusting the screen, but they went the wrong direction. The direction isn't plus, is not through it. It's not adding more, but rather it's the subtractive view, stepping back away from the screen to see what you may have accepted as a premise that may not actually have been established by facts. So the final view, the MSM minus, is more immersed in the real world, or as immersed in it, as the red pillar, the conspiracy theorist, is caught up in the augmented world. And this is a big distinction, and it's kind of important. You have to look at how the 9/11 truth movement failed. 9/11 truth failed. How many years has it been? They never actually figured it out. The entire, and you can look at, until Alex Jones says there were no planes and nobody died, you can just say 9/11 truth failed. And you would have thought with his resources and his network, they would have figured it out. Well, obviously they would have. It means they know. And there's a reason why they want you to believe the alternative stories. It prevents you from seeing the nature of our hoaxed world. So this Trump head up on the wall is just another one of these instances of foreshadowing for what's likely to be a 9/11, a black swan. That's why he wears a 45-47 on the side of his head, which of course you add it, stands for 9/11. Elephant Tusk says, when will IPS start selling Faraday cages? You know, I thought about selling 5G protective undergarments. I'm sure there's a market for it. Now, let me point out a couple of things about the Trump head effigy with the battered eye. Do you remember the shooting of Reagan and Brady, which was big for the gun control movement? But if you remember the shooting of Reagan and Brady, it was like John Hinckley, mental case. He was inspired by Taxi Driver, the Robert De Niro movie, or De Niro's in it, where he's, the taxi driver who I guess kind of almost does a political assassination. So Hinckley goes out and he shoots at Reagan and shoots Brady. This John Hinckley's birthday happens to be JFK's birthday, 5/29. Just a coincidence. But here's the interesting thing about it. The shooting of Hinckley by Hinckley of Brady didn't result in his death right away. It took him 33 years to die, or rather, when he died 33 years later, they said, "Yeah, we're ruling the cause of death homicide." 33 years after the fact. That's kind of interesting, because his injury was actually to his left eye. I'm like thinking there's something kind of a connection here between the head wound and the number 33. And I remember Salman Rushdie had just been shot, or stabbed rather, and he was stabbed on stage as a result of a fatwa, some kind of a hit that was put on him, and it was for $3.3 million. So here you have a guy getting his eye stabbed after a 33-year hit for $3.3 million. Now here's the article. James Brady's death is ruled a homicide. His wounds were inflicted 33 years ago, but he died from John Hinckley Jr.'s attack on President Reagan. 33 years after shooting, Reagan's aide ruled a death. Again, just kind of a strange coincidence, I suppose, but I'm thinking that this is all part of this bigger network or collection of predictive programming examples. And someone else in our Gilded server had even pointed out that that weird sticky black goo that rolled down Giuliani's face, which could not have been hair dye, might also be part of this absurd and grotesque theater. Because isn't that what we're talking about? We're talking about theater. Here it is. Noel said, "I think Giuliani's dripping hair dye was predictive programming for a future televised head injury. Giuliani was one of the big 9/11 actors, and a Trump event would be a new 9/11 of sorts." And again, Trump's hat has a 9/11 on the side of it. And I said, very good. Very likely the case, considering how close these two are. I remember back in the day when Trump was motorboating Giuliani. Yeah, these two are close. They're very close. They're chummy. They're pals. It wouldn't shock me at all. And then even him, Roger Stone, who's a big friend of Trump's, he has this image of Trump in the background, and in some of the pictures, it looks like there's something in front of it that makes it a crosshair over Trump's head. And Roger Stone actually says this. He says, "Assassination attempt possible." He just put this out. Let me play a clip. This is from Rumble. Again, if you just got here, this is Infinite Plane Saturn Day. I'll open up phones here in just a moment. But I want to play this clip of Roger Stone, who has a tramp stamp of Richard Nixon. When I saw him joining Trump as an advisor, I saw, look, there's going to be another Watergate. It's predictable.
This trick to power your home.
In fact, much of what we do here consists of spoiler alerts based on how predictable the world stage is. And that's all we're doing here is we're giving you the ultimate spoilers. Now, here it is. This is Roger Stone fires back at MSNBC smear, and this is on InfoWars. And he says, "Trump assassination possible." Why is this being put out there?
Trump has said this is the final battle. This is it. It is a time for choosing. The other problem, in all honesty, for them is the insurgent candidacy of Robert Kennedy in the Democratic Party is a problem for them. Sure, they can.
All very interesting. I'm not going to play the whole thing. It's all scripted and fake. Roger Stone is the same guy who claimed that there was a satanic portal swirling above the White House and that he was not really Politico, but in fact a prayer warrior, and he prayed the hole closed. So Roger Stone saved us from the legions of hell. Thank you, Roger Stone, for praying so hard to close that satanic portal. And he said it with a straight face. And I'm pretty sure it's because somebody paid him on Cameo to do so. But right now he's pushing this story, and he said final battle. Well, this is Armageddon, the apocalypse stuff. Waco, American Apocalypse, came out on Netflix at the end of March, just when Trump kicks off his campaign. The night after he kicks off his campaign, in fact. It's like I'm watching Waco, American Apocalypse, and then Trump is in Waco, and he's like, this is the final battle. And of course, all this calls back to the 33-year-old Dave Koresh, said he was Jesus, everybody believed him, being incinerated by the DHS and FBI, which radicalized Alex Jones. Alex Jones was radicalized when he saw the government. That's why he became anti-government. That's why he became Mr. Anti-Gun Control, because Waco was about weapons violations, and he helped them rebuild their compound. So you have this strong connection between Jones, Koresh, McVeigh, and this right-wing domestic violent extremist specter they've created that's just waiting to attack, some kind of domestic 9/11. They've been planning this for a long time, and it's all in the number codes. I talked about this yesterday, and I'll upload that archive, but the number, the 1/6, January 6th, that number has been consistently encoded into everything connected to this, even going back to the Waco 1.6 million rounds. Or even more recently, Putin's Satan II missile, which they said can fly 16,000 miles per hour. It's a very consistent pattern here. Okay, let's continue. I'm not going to play too much of Roger Stone. Very active grifter there. I mean, what do you want to call him? Because anybody who is this close to the top of this thing is just really they're at this point they'll almost pander to anything, praying to satanic portals. They'll pander to the Q movement. A lot of it's just pandering, and I think it's reaching out to the conspiracy theorists as some kind of a voting block. And I think it's a nice concept or an easy sell, where they know that they can convince a lot of people that Trump can save them from these big conspiracies. And I'm like, no, most of the stuff that he's going to save you from don't actually exist. Please, save me from the fake nukes. I can't sleep. I wake up at 3 a.m. because of fake nukes. No, it wouldn't work. It works much better if you believe you can be instantly annihilated. Now, this is a big deal for those of you who care about reality. This is a big deal because we're talking about the January 6 martyrs. They're going to jail. Oh, Joe Biggs. They're sending him to jail for 17 years. You know, boo-hoo. Well, look at this. Because you know it's fake. 2 weeks ago, Taylor Toronto, in a 2-hour interview, revealed that he believes Ashley Babbitt was acting. He doesn't believe she's dead. He was there. He believes they used fake blood. This is something that emerged in the last 2 weeks, and Rafa from Woo's News actually went on Sam Tripoli and brought this up. And we will have we'll have Woo's News on here very soon. But yes, we actually have an actor, or rather somebody who was there claiming she was an actor. Play this clip.
Think any of those people there were actual protesters, were actually there because they were for Trump or for whatever reason? You all think they were?
Oh, pause it. Just let it play. I'll get a better shot of it. No, I believe that they all know what's going on. I believe that
the ones in
scene
this
was
room,
rehearsed.
to be clear, but not.
And there he is, right there. Pause it. Go ahead. Right there
with
to the left with the glasses and the hat.
Oh, that
This guy?
guy?
With the beard. Yep.
Okay.
Oh,
That's Taylor Toronto.
Okay, so Taylor Toronto, there on the left, was there. And this is meant to be a closed set. And it wasn't perfectly closed. I think there were some cracks through which some people who probably weren't in on it managed to see. But you can find videos showing, you have, of course, the everything wrong with the Capitol shooting. But you can find other people breaking it down and showing you frame by frame. What you can say unequivocally is that the death of Ashley Babbitt was not something that was recorded in one shot and then shown to us. It went through some kind of a production studio. There's a jump cut. She's wearing some kind of padding on her back. Like, it has all the indications of being a stunt. And the setup involved them, breaking these windows, but you can look in the video, they weren't even windows, it was plexiglass. And you can actually find other examples that would indicate it was fake blood. They used a squib. But here we have an eyewitness, someone who was there, Taylor Toronto. And this is just within the last month.
So 2 weeks ago, he came out and he said, it's a 2-hour interview that he did with Defender Vance. I was just made aware of this very recently, and I watched the entire interview, and I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So I can send that to you if you'd like as well.
That's
that
crazy.
interview.
That's so.
But yeah, he goes on to say that she's acting, that Jaden X is acting, that she's acting terribly. He doesn't believe she's dead, and he believes they use fake blood.
See, this is a big deal. This is a very big deal. Because if Ashley Babbitt's not dead, then her mom is an actress, and Trump showed up via video to Ashley Babbitt's first posthumous birthday to say it shouldn't have happened, she died for a good cause, etc. It's a manufactured martyr. And all the January 6 martyrs are fake. The QAnon shaman is therefore fake. You do not have one real legitimate person in the middle of a hoax on a closed set this vast. And here you have just corroboration with the observable facts that Ashley Babbitt's not dead. So this undermines everything that they're about. It undermines so much. This is actually a clip here, I believe. Taylor Toronto spills the beans on the Ashley Babbitt J6 narrative part 2. He says, quote, "This is where I start learning what I'm figuring out."
That's me screaming.
That's you screaming?
I thought so. Yeah, I think so. Get out of the way, something to the effect, right?
Okay, we're looking at the scuffle here. Ashley Babbitt's on the ground, and the person who's speaking, Taylor Toronto, is starting to figure out what's going on, and I think they're trying to shoo him away.
Now that guy is repeating stuff.
Now you're looking at a bunch of drama, totally fake, or rather, it looks very rehearsed, I'll say. But we're looking at a walkthrough of this video by the person who's filming it, and he's describing where he's starting to figure out that this is a fake incident. And there's another live streamer there who you can see in one video watches her fall and then rushes over and touches her neck. Then he runs outside and his hand is bloody. And he says, "They shot somebody and she fell into my arms. Look at the blood." No, she didn't fall into his arms. He wasn't even close. So why would he get blood on his hands from some lady that just got shot and then run outside and claim that this person died in his hands, died in his arms? No, he went out there with a scripted line showing the blood on his hand for propaganda purposes. You know, he was a live streamer who was actually working as part of the PSYOP. And this is clever of them because when the media does it and it's reported by CNN, you can say it's fake. But when it looks like it's grassroots, it's a little trickier. Again, here we're looking at Taylor Toronto just explaining how Ashley Babbitt isn't dead. Now, I'm not going to play the whole thing because I'm going to be speaking with Woo's News very soon about this, and we'll get more clips. But what he said was, this is a quote, "The whole thing looked like a puppet show."
36. Some of the violence that has been.
This whole thing looks orchestrated. This whole thing looks like a puppet show.
This whole thing looked orchestrated like a puppet show. I 100% agree. But he definitely spilled the beans on this thing. He definitely did. And this is going to be circulating among those of us who have this off-world stage perspective. But the people who are entranced by Trump and who are worshiping that golden idol, the ones who are pretty much caught up in the soap opera or the psyop opera of politics, they're not going to see the value in this. They're going to have to hold on to their mythology. Fascinating, though. Yeah, Frank Zen, this is the 1/6 incident. We have within the last couple of weeks, we have someone who was there who can attest to the obvious fakery involved in the January 6th PSYOP, specifically the Ashley Babbitt thing. And it was a mostly closed set. I would say 99% closed. So you have these Proud Boys coming out sobbing because of the long sentences. They're not going anywhere. They're not going to jail. They're not going to prison. It's obviously a hoax. Diana South says, "The kid with blood on his hands was talking with Edward Zoll when he was with True News, but now with Stu Peters." Interesting. Small world at the, when you get into these circles, it's kind of a small circle of people. I mean, really. Because Stu Peters is the one who just called for the hanging of Fauci and Hunter Biden. That's how you know he's a Fed. There's no way you can get away with saying these types of things if you're not pay to do so. Okay, let's continue here. We've covered the Donald Trump head wound thing at the White House, which is obviously meant for us to see. If you want to follow along with the notes that we follow here, it's at minds.com/Infinite Plane Society. It's all of our best clues or puzzle pieces. And a lot of times people say things in Discord that are worth discussing, or they say things in Gilded, and we can't trust these platforms. So I will screen cap the entire comment so we can maintain our threads here. And I'll post them there in Minds. So anyway, anytime you see me referencing something, if it's coming out of Gilded or Minds or even Rofkin, it all ends up here. So I don't miss anything. For example, Robotic Double 3K said, and this is from Rofkin, I imagine there are some not only cog-dizzy pilots regurgitating ball propaganda, but when they have a god complex, they can't be reasoned with. And this is in reference to the interview with the pilot, Quincy Carr. Great explanation on behalf of everyone, FE, as to why we seemingly know we don't live on a spinning, tilted, orbiting ball. Great show. Thank you for the comments. And yes, you're responding to the statements by Quincy Carr about how the pilots that he's spoken to are not even approachable with this topic, that they could be wrong about something as big as the shape of the world, something as fundamental, and just accept it. You're supposed to just accept it. But it's about burden of proof. People wrongfully, and this is just because of training, habit, and tradition, people have wrongfully accepted the burden of proof too often. Like when somebody lies and they tell you something without evidence and you don't believe it, you're supposed to be able to challenge that before you accept it. But if you're not allowed to challenge it, if it's on you to prove them wrong and you accept that, if they're clever enough, you will never be able to prove them wrong. You'll be stuck in their version of reality. Here's an interesting piece here. Eagles' Jason Kels says, quote, you'd be surprised how many NFL players believe Earth is flat. Not that I place a lot of value in this. I don't think it's significant when celebrities say this stuff, because these individuals are also part of a rigged system itself. But who knows? These things are somewhat compartmentalized. Maybe he's not super high up that pyramid to the point where he gets involved in the public satanic rituals like Damar Hamlin. Now listen to this. I was on the practice field last year, and one of our coaches was walking by, and I was like, man, how many people do you think on this field believe the earth is flat? And he says, I don't think anybody out there believes that. And I said, you'd be surprised. If you start polling, you would be surprised. And even before I finished, somebody next to me said, how do you know it isn't? How do you know it isn't is a good starting point for the conversation. Because really what it comes down to is Group A believes it is this because they saw it on TV. And Group B is just saying, well, minus that, I don't have any reason to go with the explanation you've accepted. So it leaves you in a state of somewhat agnosticism. And at the point I made to the interviewer the other day, the producer for that documentary on this kind of pre-interview, was that you're going to find more, quote, globe skeptics than, quote, flat earthers. And I think it makes a lot more sense to adopt skepticism instead of an alternative belief system when you don't have any more evidence to substantiate it. Okay, continuing, joined by Northern Girl. Thank you for joining. Diana South says, Laura Witzque, Death Cult, says those guys are already dead via military tribunals. Yeah, they can't make up their minds. Either the deep state were killed in 2017, and they were replaced with actors, and it's all just a show, or they're still alive and they're about to be killed. This is the thing about the Q movement, is that they're always waiting for all the bad guys to die for this great awakening. But then they're also convinced that it already happened and they already won. So they have it both ways. They're always eager for this anticipated awakening, and they've already awakened to the reality. It's mind control at its finest. It's cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance used to break up the integrity of somebody's grasp on reality. It's pretty terrible. It's it's just designed to be illogical, I believe. Okay, now listen to this. This is just more examples, I think, of why we can't pretend like the insurrection wasn't scripted and staged to fail. But this is an interesting one, because they record everything. It's like Watergate all over again. In a conference call before riot, a plea to descend on the Capitol. So here we're looking at John Sullivan told a group of supporters that they had to go to Washington on January 6th. A week before the angry mob stormed the Capitol, communications expert John Sullivan, an aide to Roger Stone, was on a conference call, and he had assured listeners that the election had been stolen and that they had to go to Washington on January 6th, on the day that Congress was to meet to finalize the electoral count. And he said, quote, descend on the Capitol. So this call was obtained by the New York Times. So we have example after example of this plan to do more than just have a rally. So I think we can stop pretending it was just going to be a MAGA rally. It was always going to be a failed insurrection attempt. It was always going to be a honeypot, and it was always going to be a trap. I think they did this to, honestly, to destroy nationalism, to destroy patriotism, or to basically turn the vision of a patriot into something of a terrorist, like Timothy McVeigh. Was Timothy McVeigh a terrorist or a patriot? You know, ask Alex Jones his opinion. I'd be very curious to know. Pippi Langstrup says, high trust, low proof. I like that. Diana South says, and the Q have their good guys raised from the dead. Oh yes, JFK Jr., who's a prince, Michael Jackson, the king of pop, Princess Diana, a princess, yeah. And then the obsession with JFK, it's all about that Camelot. So they do have this cult of personality, these royal bloodlines. It's very twisted. It's pure fan fiction. Now this is an interesting take. I want to point this out. Because right now in Maui, we have this story. You know, what happened? Did climate change do it? Or did direct energy weapons do it? Well, now we have a lot of videos showing that the entire area was closed off. And so the explanation is that the police were blocking cars, that cops trapped people in a kill zone. Now that sounds ominous. So now we're accusing Maui police of war crimes, of mass murder. Is that what we're accusing them of? Oh yeah, the Maui police just incinerated 1,000 children. Like, that's a pretty tall claim to not bring any evidence. I wouldn't make such a claim that the police blocked cars in to kill people, and they'll say, well, maybe they didn't mean to, or maybe it was controlled them. I don't what they'll say. They'll make up explanations. They'll say the cops, maybe they didn't know, but the consequences were a lot of people died. And I'm saying the assumption that people died can be subtracted here. Because what are we looking at? Either one, a kill zone, or two, a closed movie set. We don't have evidence for it being a kill zone. Now we have past precedent of a closed movie set. Was Las Vegas not a closed movie set? The Las Vegas concert shooting was more or less, I mean, it's a concert and it's open, but if you look at the way they arranged it, they set it all up in such a way that they would have the most amount of control over potential non-involved witnesses. Most of the people there had to be insiders, and they had to flush out people at the very end. I mean, there was an individual who was lurking, and security said, leave. And he was saying, why are the stadium lights off? There are people here who need first responders. And the security said, they're already dead, just leave. Which doesn't even make sense. My point being, there is a connection between Maui and it being a closed movie set and the Vegas closed movie set. And it would be the police chief. He's one of the links that connect the two events. And I'm not going to believe for 1 second that he could have presided over one of the biggest fake mass shootings in American history. And then he happens to preside over a real mass casualty event with all the hallmarks of it being fake. Nope. If one is fake, both are fake. So I'm saying fake until proven real. And one more thing. The scenario in Maui of direct energy weapons being used on a kill zone to kill poor people so their land can be taken for Oprah and Jeff Bezos. Yeah, the people who assert this are as scared of science fiction weapons like do that as the climate change people are scared of climate change. Like these are parallel systems. Like I'm terrified of capitalism because look what it did to Maui. Oh, I'm terrified of Chinese orbiting space lasers because look what it did to Maui. Well, I'm not. Am I the only one here who's not terrified? Like I'm not scared of Gaia and I'm not scared of space lasers and I'm not pining over dead kids that don't exist. Like I will maintain that fake dead kids' lives don't matter. I think that's a good axiom. Like at no point are you going to convince me that I need to be radicalized or agitated over fake deaths. I don't care what the age. Do any of you here care about fake dead kids? I'm trying to see if anyone here cares. Do we have any fake parents? Let's see. Continuing. Angle of Elevation says descend on the Capitol doesn't mean let's take over the country by getting angry. Yeah, but look, you would be dishonest if you were to say that there wasn't a plan to interrupt the proceedings. Going back in even in November, I remember reading about this stuff. They were saying, yeah, this is going to be the point where America transitions from a corporation into a republic, that they have to put their own electors up, that they have to stop Mike Pence from certifying the election. That this was, it was like maybe not everybody said the quiet part out loud, but more and more we're hearing that quiet part. They're losing their plausible deniability, and I'm saying let's go ahead and let's stop pretending like the January 6 people were innocent, and that if it wasn't for Ray Epps, nobody would have done that. People are like the feds did it. Oh yeah, one Fed went out there, 5 feds, 10 feds, whatever it is. A handful of people agitated a big mob until what? They lose their free will. I have free will. There's nothing you can say that's going to make me go loot and riot and then say, I wouldn't have done it if this guy didn't say something. No. You have to believe in individual responsibility. And the Ray Epps scapegoat story, which was made popular by Tucker Carlson, is not only not believable, but it's not an excuse anyway. Diana South says, good t-shirt, fake dead kids' lives don't matter. Yeah, I think it'd be a good one. In fact, you know what? Here's what we'll do. Because we have the office space here, and that's thanks to everyone here who's part of this think tank. And this conference room is one of the main reasons we got this. I said, we need a big dry erase board. We need to be able to do mind maps. We need to be able to debate things into nuance in a very constructive and organized way, where I can invite third party, I can invite media, I can invite people to debate who aren't even a part of the online communities very easily by just bringing them here to the office. And I think it would make sense to have a conversation about mass shootings, and I would certainly make such a shirt available. I would wear it. You want to debate me and try to convince me that fake dead kids' lives do matter? Let's have that conversation. Engel says, dishonest would be calling it a failed insurrection. It was a handful of dumbasses with no plan. No, not at all. The January 6th thing was totally fake, staged, closed set, and it was designed to be an insurrection that failed. It was designed to look that way, and that's why these people are going to jail. If you think it's an injustice that these J6ers are martyrs, well, you're missing the point. The J6 crowd are a bunch of feds. Nobody's really going to jail. These aren't real. The fact that we have an eyewitness exposing that Ashley Babbitt's not dead should be a real eye-opener here. The thing was meant to stall everything. This has been said again and again by Roger Stone. It's been said by others. In fact, you can find a clip if you don't want to be disingenuous and, play the same game the media plays. You can find a clip where Trump clearly states his intention, and this was meant to be leaked, where he said, turn off the mags. Well, what do you think that means? And they said, well, he said something like, turn off the mags, and they said, well, they've got weapons. And he said, those aren't for me. Well, what does that mean? It's for the other guys. That was meant to sound like it sounded to the J6 Commission, that basically Trump wanted his armed supporters in there. So they have all the pieces to this story out there to put it together for yourself. No need to pretend like anybody here is innocent. But another important point of it is that the whole insurrection thing was meant to attack anybody with good intentions who believed in it as well. It's a huge smear campaign, and it wouldn't surprise me if future textbooks present the letter Q the way that we were presented with the swastika. I think that's the future. Not Shock says America destroys nationalism in the U.S. just like they have done all around the world to protect democracy. Well, they have turned the nationalist into a terrorist. And they've been doing this since McVeigh. And this is why McVeigh and Dave Koresh are so closely related to Alex Jones, who's closely related to the top of the January 6th thing. They're all part of the same story. And now on top of it all, Trump kicks off his campaign in Waco, calls it the final battle. Roger Stone says final battle. Netflix puts out Waco final battle. And all of it is basically saying the same thing. It's all reiterating the same messaging. Joined by Thirst for Truth. Thanks for joining. Infinite Plane Saturn Day. Phones are open. Let me check and see if I have any voicemails. Now, Monday we do have the crew coming in here, and after that is shot, I will be forthcoming with all the details about who it is and where they're from. I just didn't want to leave the possibility open that we could have some kind of saboteurs. We know how the other side, how the opposition rolls, but no, this is going to go down without a hitch. Everything's been organized. It's pretty simple. The whole purpose of it is for Infinite Plane Society to be included in a documentary that's covering a lot of conspiracy theories, but they needed somebody who can convey what the flat earth topic really is and how you might arrive at this level of skepticism. And I think we have a few things to say in this regard. So they're coming over here and they are going to record a live stream in the office, and it'll be a great opportunity, I think, to set a few things straight on this topic. And after this, we will be heading over to the flood control dam, which you may recognize the location if you watch Breaking Bad. It's the place that you go before you fake your death. So if I die, let's just say like next week, it's probably fake. Because that dam, which weirdly looks like a cemetery, it's this flood control dam with these concrete blocks that look like tombstones. But that's where Walter White gets dropped off in order to be taken away so he can fake his death. But it happens to be, to my knowledge, the only place in town where you can get a 360-degree view of the horizon without any obstructions, except for one 5G tower. And that's where we're going to record most of our interview and the conversations that we have. Additionally, if any of you want to appear in this and you can't make it to Albuquerque, you can certainly be interviewed remotely via Skype. So we're going to open that up as well on Monday. But my point being, after that is done, I'm going to start this regular series of cyber symposiums, topic by topic. Like, I think the IPS think tank can shoot down the ISS in one afternoon. And I think if we just go after this in a very methodical fashion, opening it up to debate, inviting subject matter experts, and even opening it up to debate. But I think if we elevate the discourse above the ad hominem attacks and the controlled debates that you see on YouTube, we'll get much further with it. Engel says the feds won't go to jail, just like the Michigan governor kidnapping. It took a fed and actors and some gullible Q types to get it done. See, there is that. But then, you remember when Patriot Front came out on 6/11/2022 from the back of a U-Haul truck? There were 33 of them. And a cop nearby whispered to a live streamer that we knew that they were going to disrupt the protests because we had some of our guys on the inside. Well, I look at these 33 Patriot Fronts handcuffed with their masks still on, and I'm thinking, how many of them are dupes and how many are feds? And I'm thinking it's 100%. How would you have some innocent people caught up in something that's fake and they're still caught up in it? Like, for example, the QAnon shaman and these other guys who supposedly went into jail. And I think he went to some kind of acting school and learned how to communicate better? The Q shaman? I think he went into media training. I don't think he went into a cell. But how could you keep someone like him in a cell if he knew that Ashley Babbitt wasn't dead? He would be the ultimate whistleblower, and it would be the ultimate defense against the criminality of any of the perpetrators if the whole thing was predicated on an insurrection that wasn't even real, that was simulated. It's a simulated riot with simulated victims. You can't go to jail for that. So I'm saying that there are no innocents, in that there's no innocent people caught up in the wheels of this thing, that anybody who is being dragged into it is likely an informant or a Fed. All right, let us continue here, going through my minds.com. Scientists warn 1 billion people are on track to die from climate change. The fossil fuels that humanity burns today will be a death sentence for many lives tomorrow. Now, this to me is the main weapon or the main consolidator of power that the power elite have, because nukes are fake. Knowing this, they can never actually produce it, but the threat of it is enough, at least to maintain a stable order. But since those are fake, how can they really use it to assert like the level of control that they want without eventually producing something? And I think what they've arrived at is maybe it's too divisive. If one country does it, they can never be friends with everybody else. But climate change, by contrast, is unifying. Everybody is affected by it. Everybody has to agree, or we all pay. And I think if they're looking for a collective universal threat, it's far more predictable than asteroids or meteors, and it's far more plausible, I think, to most people than than pretty much anything else they've come up with. I'm just saying that to say 1 billion people are going to die, this is why I say we're in a a doomsday cult. But this perspective, it makes you a murderer just for being a consumer, for one. You're killing Gaia, but now you're killing future generations. But this is the main unifier. It's their main weapon. And they really want you to believe it. Speaking of weapons, Putin's new secret weapon, Russian military develops killer octopus. And this was shared by Lean Dion over there in Gilded. A killer giant squid that can hypnotize its prey. A 33-foot long man-eater also boasts extraordinary camouflage that could help it stalk using shape-shifting. So some kind of a 33-foot octopus weapon, or a weaponized octopus. I'm only bringing it up because, one, it is reminiscent of the Kraken. Two, Putin is talking about using his nuke. So if we're talking about the Kraken symbolism, and we bring in a squid as a weapon, and it's 33 feet long, it says here, the 33-foot long man-eater boasts extraordinary camouflage. Well, this would correlate to a few things, like, for example, Godzilla, Kraken-like entity at sub-level 33. And we see this constantly referenced, like James Cameron goes down to the Titanic in his deep-sea Challenger 33 times. So the 33, the underwater weapon, the Kraken connotation with Putin, who even now is advertising his new weapon. Yep, it's all just reinforcement. Another one here. This is Meg 2, The Trench reviews sharks, krakens, and dinosaurs. Just a lot of this symbolism of the Kraken is popping up everywhere. I just watched this movie reminiscent of The Rig. I talked about The Rig last year, which used the Kraken symbolism. It's always the same. Gaia is going to wake up if we don't get rid of oil rigs, and it's going to destroy us all. It's a reoccurring theme on Amazon. I've noticed this. Amazon tends to reinforce the environmentalist cli-fi stuff, climate fiction. And Netflix seems to be more focused on, I don't know what you would call it. It seems like they're introducing a lot of, like, is it demonology, neo-Gnosticism, a lot of occultism, transcendence through technology, like a lot of the stuff having to do with Neuralink, for example. I'm also finding, oh, another one, sex bots are huge on Amazon. 2050. There's a movie called 2050 about the future, how everyone just replaces their spouse with a robot. And I'm thinking this has got to be just commercials for future Amazon products. But both of these are both just platforms that really indicate where the world is at right now. If you want to know where it's at, you want to know where it's going, you got to look at Netflix and maybe even Amazon for future trends. Okay, moving on. Violet says Russia's first moon mission in 47 years is Russia's Lunar 25 probe. It likely left a 33-foot crater on the surface of the moon last month when it lost control and crashed down. Now, let me point out this. Lee Harvey Oswald was believed to be like a Russian asset or something, and he shoots JFK. Now, we have Russia launching a probe to the moon, and it crashes. And I think there might be something to this if you dig a little deeper. The number 47 really stood out to me because, of course, we're talking about President number 47. But it gets deeper. The Highland Park shooter, remember Parkland High, Nicholas Cruz? Well, the Parkland High shooter was actually in the news at the time of the Highland Park shooting. And it got me looking into it, and it turns out JFK was taken to Parkland Hospital. So all this is standing out to me. Well, on 4th of July, 2022, the shooter of the people at the parade had a 47 tattooed on his temple. And I thought this has got to be foreshadowing for some kind of sniper attack or a shooting of Trump because he was previously seen at Trump rallies and he had a poster on his wall, a newspaper clip that had Lee Harvey Oswald. So you have someone who fetishizes Lee Harvey Oswald, shoots up a 4th of July parade, again, 7-4, the date, 7-4-47. He has 47 tattooed on his head, and now Trump is wearing a 47 on his head because he's got that hat. The MAGA hat has 45-47, which again, you add it, you get 9/11, but it's right there. And what's more, the shooter, I think his name was Rob Cremio, the one who shot up the parade, his mom was at Target. So you see a picture of his mom with a Target bag that has a Target symbol. Her son, the sniper, who frequents Trump rallies, idolizes the Lee Harvey Oswald, possibly a Russian asset. And then here again you have this foreshadowing, I think, where Russia's moon mission crashes the moon, 33-foot wide crater, 47 years since their last one. So the number 47, I think, is another reference to this Trump thing. And the 33, as I mentioned before, is correlated with the shooting, the head wound. James Brady dies of a homicide 33 years after his head wound when they try to shoot Reagan, and the guy that shot Reagan and Brady had JFK's birthday. It's a very interconnected story, and it's really compounding layers of predictive programming at this point. Okay, moving on. Yes, Frank Zen says the Tucker interview on Twitter was telegraphing an assassination. Exactly. Now, you know the story of the space salami? The space chorizo? Where all the smartest people, all the scientists, fell for a trick. An astronomer with access to a $10 billion telescope that you paid for put a slice of salami against the backdrop of stars, and he fooled the world. They all fell for it, with the exception of one group. The only group of people that didn't fall for the space salami were flat earthers, because they know that when it's coming from the space agencies, it's fake until proven real, and they haven't done that yet. Well, it's going to be the same thing. When this thing happens, when, not if, because predictive programming is part of a script. So when the script reaches its crescendo and this happens, everybody's going to fall for it, except for auto hoaxers. We're the only ones apprised of the truth, and we're going to be aware of the situation as it actually is, but we're going to have to watch how it's responded to by the people who think it's real. And it's probably going to be ugly. In fact, it will be ugly. It always is. And I point this out on Twitter and they hate me for it. Whenever there's a mass shooting, you see the left jumping on top of it and scapegoating the right. And I just point out there's nothing that the libs love more than a pile of dead kids to grandstand on top of. And they think these are real dead kids. So I tell them fake dead kids' lives don't matter. And I get called a monster for it. Like, I'm not the one covered in blood trying to score political points. I'm not the one here basically celebrating child sacrifice, and you're calling me bad? But it shows you where their hearts are. Totally dark, evil hearts. I mean, that's just cold. It really is. Because they don't really care about those kids or those families. But their political inclinations or just their political fanaticism is so great that they see dead kids as an opportunity to score points. Assuming those kids died of the right thing, of course. And it's like the right wing. Jack Posobiec was like crying about the missing Maui kids. He's like, 1,000 kids in Maui died of direct energy weapons and nobody cares. And I'm like, you don't ever care when they die of AR-15. And I don't even believe in the AR-15 deaths. Just pointing it out that there's a hypocrisy here. That one side of the political spectrum doesn't care about dead kids who died of this cause or this particular thing because they support this thing, and vice versa. Okay, let's continue. And in case you had any concerns, the Satan II rocket is fake. They claim they can take out Texas or England with one hit, but if you look at it, it's definitely the same type of computer simulation that Blue Origin uses and North Korea. North Korea's rocket fakery has been called out by even mainstream sources that they're faking their rocket launches. They're faking their missile tests. And I thought, that's interesting. Aren't they violating some kind of internal code? You'd think that the space fakers, because like NASA doesn't call out JAXA. They don't call out the ESA. Like, they don't attack each other on their bad special effects. But for some reason, North Korea gets teased about its fake missiles. But here you have it. This is Satan II. It's supposed to scare you. If you're Alex Jones, you're ducking and covering right now because of that flying obelisk. But what you're really doing is you're genuflecting to their God. And I refuse to do so. I'm not going to cower in fear, and I'm not going to cheer because it's going to go, into space. Okay, we're scrolling to myminds.com. I'll upload archives later. And we went into much deeper detail about the Putin's 16,000 mile per hour doomsday nuke dubbed Satan II that can sink UK in one strike. Okay, yeah, don't want to go over too much from yesterday, so I'm going to go ahead and leave it at that. My home internet's down at the moment, so I'm here at the office, and I wasn't able to archive last night, but I'm going to do it before I leave. We have a eyewitness to the fake death of Ashley Babbitt, who called it out as fake recently, and we will be discussing that more in the near future with Rafa of Woo's News. Woo's News is the one who broke down January 6th like nothing else. And he's done a part 2, and he's wrapping up a part 3, after which he's going to speak with me and with Fakeologist. It's groundbreaking. It's big. Because 9/11 was followed up by Loose Change, which created a fake truther movement that gave them a fake explanation for what didn't even happen. And it kept them in the loop. It kept them in the world stage drama. And what I'm suggesting here is that this Woo's News breakdown of January 6th will be the opposite of a loose change. It's completely destroying the presumption that the thing was that the thing was real. That, yeah, it looked real, but it wasn't real. It maybe is going to be treated as real from here on out, which is kind of perplexing. It's like, look at all these people who are spellbound. But we're in new territory, because 9/11 truth was sabotaged from the beginning. And this particular breakdown of January 6th is kind of just way out beyond the purview of alternative media. It's not like Alex Jones will touch it. I'm actually pleased that Sam Tripoli touched it, because he's pretty close to Eddie Bravo, who's pretty close to Rogan, who's pretty close to Jones. But who knows how close it can get, because this is actually undermining this worship of Trump. It actually destroys the credibility of the entire political theater right now. If January 6th is fake and all these martyrs are fake, then what are we really looking at here? Linda Curtis says they are preparing for the rods of God. Yes, the rods of God, these tungsten rods the size of like light poles, they drop kinetic weapons. See, I think that's one thing they could do. Space is fake, but if you wanted to fake space wars, you would have a bunch of satelloons with tungsten rods and you would have them dropped on all kinds of areas, and you would just provide CGI backup. You could make it look like anything's doing it. Oh, we're hitting a meteor storm. Aliens are attacking. A good find. This is posted in Discord. I think this is Violet. Having to do with Rudy Giuliani's leak. Rudy's next preposterous presser was at the RNC on 11/19. During the longest 2 hours ever, Rudy developed flop sweat that caused his hair dye to drip down his face in long brown streaks that many mistook for blood, and the video blew up on the internet. So we were talking about the predictive programming for the Trump thing and Rudy's leaking head, and yeah, people thought it was blood. But note the date, 11/9. Very 9/11-y. Could that be the future Black Swan? I think so. All right, continuing. Angle of Elevation says, I saw a video of the Maui fires. They found a car melted, and after showing how brittle the metal was, they uncovered the remains of a cat. That means whatever happened fast. I think I saw that one where he was pulling back on this metal and you saw what looked to be, it looks like a gray wig. It could have been a cat or a dog. He said it smelled. But those two cars were in the middle of a parking lot that were separated from all these houses. And I thought, what would they be doing right there? I got the feeling that we were looking at prop cars. Like, imagine if you had access to the prop department for The Walking Dead. You could fake a Maui thing in hours. You'd have trucks unload these fake burned out cars. I think it's all staged, like the Boston bombing or 9/11. I don't believe it's real. I think it's fakeable. Let's ask this question. Was Maui fakeable? Was there anything that happened that could not have been faked? That's a very important question to ask, because if it's fakeable and it has all the hallmarks of being a hoax and there's reasons for it to be faked, if there's political utility to it, then of course they would. And there's enough predictive programming for this to be, I think, construed as a guardrail, the whole idea of direct energy weapons. I mean, even Mountain Dew, Maui Blast, it's too perfect. Lean Dion says, selective arson on the ground. Props and CGI. Yes, you got selective arson, props, CGI, and you have actors. You have live streaming actors who are able to go out there and verify for their particular audience, who are prepared to say, no, it's not climate change, it's sci-fi. Skill says, the physics of fire and the melting point of truth. Maybe it's just movie magic. People say that the moon landing, is like the culmination of, years of research, science, and physics. No, actually movie magic, not science, is what got us to the moon. But it's definitely fakeable. And I think it's entirely plausible that they would construct these things. Hey, look at this. Jake the Asshole said, I specifically made a video about how these two cars look like stage props. Meanwhile, Hawaii real estate guy is leading everyone to think it's a do attack. Exactly. I knew you would see sense in this. I kind of thought the same thing myself. These guys here are shills. Jake says, I got called a shill and a fed for suggesting there's no do attack. Interesting. Well, I want to point out that anytime there's a bifurcated psyop where left thinks it's climate change and right thinks it's fill in the blank, or it's always like this, then it's controlled. The left blames climate change for everything. School shootings, Maui, COVID, even earthquakes, they're starting to blame on climate change. It's their universal scapegoat, and it's their angry God, basically. God's mad. Gaia's mad. Angle of Elevation says CGI forest fires. Right. Yeah, look, here's an important point. anything they can fake in the movies, in this case, movies that we've seen like The Walking Dead or any of these apocalyptic movies, they can fake on the news. If they can fake it on, it's just that simple. It's not a stretch, especially when you're dealing with some place that's remote. I mean, it's perfect. It's an island. It's out there. It's gonna have a more restricted access than anywhere else I can think of. They weren't even allowing drones over. And I had said then, the reason why they don't want drones is not because they're hiding a bunch of burned up bodies. It's because they don't want you to see the green screens and the catering, the props departments, the laughing crisis actors having fun at your expense, probably drinking some kind of mixed drink with, Mountain Dew, Maui Blast, and Kahlua or something. I don't know what kind of drinks but they're celebrating. They're rubbing it in your faces. It's a big psyop. There's no dead kids. Tim Ballard would be all over it if there was, right? But I still see people saying that. I still see Laura Loomer. What about the Maui kids? I'm like, if you really cared, you would be out there. You wouldn't be trying to generate clickbait with the Goyim Defense League, a bunch of feds in Florida. You'd be out there in Maui. You'd be out there hunting for the children. Lean Dion says, now the set is closed off by black fencing. Well, here's what they're saying now. The conspiracy side is going to say that this was them, the powers that be, using direct energy weapons and a kill box to seize property. And that they're testing it in Maui because it was a smart city, the first smart city or something. And now they're going to do it everywhere. But it just sounds like a familiar story, like the whole paradise thing. Jake the A-hole says, Hawaii real estate guy is pushing the missing children narrative as well. Funny how the real estate agent never made a video calling out the government in his life until last month. So he's new. And these missing children, they were invented by rumors. I watched one of the rumor mongers, and I called her a crisis actor, and she said, debate me on my feelings. And I said, you're a terrible crisis actress. I pointed out that she seemed to be doing it for clout, and I didn't find her performance believable. And she said something like, actually she blocked me, but she says something to the effect of that these children were in school and they were let go, and then the fires happened. So she was implying that there was some plot to kill all the children, that they were walking home from school and their parents weren't there and they all got incinerated. But then where are the parents? Where are the grandparents? Where are the relatives? You're telling me there's 1,000 missing children. But they keep talking about this, and I thought Sound of Freedom was just 2 months ago, and you were all worried about these missing children that were being trafficked through the border. But now you just moved on to the next shiny object. So I realized that, quote, missing children is a hoax. Like, there are missing children, I'm sure, but the group of this, like, anonymous group of missing children is sort of a cause. Sort of like the AR-15 victims that the left is always railing about. They're always talking about the missing children, all these school shootings. Well, if you add them up, how many fake dead kids are there? We should get a body count of fake dead kids from all the fake shootings. And those children don't exist. The Maui children do not exist. The adrenochrome farms, the children that are farmed for their adrenochrome, don't exist. Of course, by saying so, now I am, of course, an adrenochrome junkie that likes to zap children with lasers. Like, they don't let you not agree with them because they're, of course, assuming a moral high ground. Okay, let's continue. Commenter Jake the A-hole says, a millionaire real estate agent is now the go-to guy for Maui D evidence. Exactly. The Maui Do evidence guy is a millionaire real estate agent who is now something of an influencer, and all of his talking points align with the same type of guardrail explanation we saw with these previous fires. I think he's an actor. Lean Dion says, any missing people have been relocated with PSYOP rewards, I estimate. Well, this is another thing too, is you can't find kids that don't exist. So you can never be proven wrong. You can crusade for the missing Maui children, raise money, and build an organization, and you will never be debunked because they never existed. It's not falsifiable. It's very similar to what I believe he was a Sidethorn journalist did. He went around to 33 different school shooting sites. And at each one, he put up an award and he said, I'll give $100,000 to anybody who can show me evidence of a dead kid. Well, nobody was able to produce it because they don't exist. And I thought, well, maybe it wasn't meant to succeed. Maybe the $100,000 reward was never meant to be given out to anybody because you couldn't possibly solve the problem in that manner. You could take $100,000 and say, were you a crisis actor? I'll give you $100,000 to talk about it. That would actually yield something because you can prove crisis actors exist. You cannot prove the existence of fake dead kids. David Hogg exists, but the victims of Nick Cruz, they may have existed previously in name and in pictures, but the characters don't actually exist. Dave Hogg doesn't exist in the conventional sense. It's almost like time travelers. Imagine if you met someone who traveled from the future, from a parallel timeline. They didn't exist, now they do. That's kind of what happens when they take a TV character, a character who exists on the news, a scripted character, or even like a spy with a fake backstory, and you insert them into the timeline of the world stage with their fake backstory. And then you integrate them, and they're treated as though they always existed. It's kind of fascinating how they're able to infiltrate from the screen and pull them out of the screen and bring them into reality. They have fused fiction and reality. I think this is truly the meaning of the monolith in 2001 Space Odyssey, the merging with the monolith. The monolith is the screen. And I believe that we have been, in terms of our perceptions, we've been merged with the screen. This is why at the very beginning of 2001 Space Odyssey, you see the monolith with an eclipse above it, the sun and the moon. That eclipse represents the merging of the real and the fake. And now, fake people can step through the screen and become real. Let's see here. Diana South says they had to walk home from school uphill 5 miles through flames and dew strikes. Yeah, good luck trying to one-up that when they tell their grandchildren. When we had to go to school. All right, moving on here. And yeah, I'm going to open up phones. Let me make sure the ringer's off. I'm very quick on the draw there. I've been mad. I have not allowed the ringer to slip through more than 2 or 3 times. Okay, let me read this quote. This is from Albert Pike, who wrote the Masonic Degrees from 4 to, I believe, 33. But it's kind of fascinating because I think it's insightful about media itself, and it's something to keep in mind. Because we talk about the big deception and how there's a pyramidal structure with the perps at the top who know what's going on, and then various levels of the deceived to the very bottom where we are, the masses, who are mere believers in these various belief systems, but they don't actually know because they're not, of course, initiates. But let me bring up this quote from Albert Pike, Morals and Dogma, page 105. Masonry, like all religions and all the mysteries, conceals its secrets from all except the adepts and the sages, or the elect, and it uses false explanations to mislead those who only deserve to be misled, to conceal the truth which calls light from them. Masonry jealously conceals its secrets and intentionally leads conceited interpreters away. So he's just remarking how it, like all of the other religions, has an exoteric and an esoteric. And this is an important point because the esoteric interpretation of it is something that's only conveyed to the people who have been given the security clearance. You could look at a secret society as a security clearance society. You have to have a certain level of security clearance before you're trusted with the inside information. And the people at the very top have gone through this filtration process. And what I'm suggesting is that as mass media is our de facto world religion, I think it's safe to say our mass media also has an inner elect. That's why we see all the same symbols that you see associated with all the big religions encoded, all the same themes, all the same archetypes encoded into the mass media. It's because it's the same. And we can, I think, deduce from this that the inner elect are the ones who know about the fakery, about the deception, about the perception management, the psy-war. I don't know about their numbers, but my point of it is we know that there are those who are on the inside, who are fully apprised of the level of fakery, who are part of a system which by design keeps those who aren't at their level in the dark, just as the masses are in the dark. But at various levels, you're given some insights. Like, I'm pretty sure that some, like Jones, for example, knows that the school shootings are hoaxed. There's no way he's going to pay $1 trillion in damages if it was a hoax. There's just no way. He's obviously a part of it. It's meant to scare you away from looking at these things. But he doesn't know space is fake. It's possible he knows that these things are fake, but this is real. So you have different levels of awareness, and they certainly keep it compartmentalized. I don't think the thing would work if you had too much information available to too many people. There would be leaks. As critics often say, there's no way this many people could keep a secret. 400,000 independent contractors could not keep their mouths shut about Apollo 11. Well, yeah, subtract from that. You have 400,000, sure, but how many were actually involved at ground zero on the day it happened? And if you start subtracting away those who didn't have to know, it's probably only a handful who are finally there on a need-to-know basis who know that it's fake at that level. I just watched Oppenheimer, and one thing about it you got clear is that this whole thing was very secretive, in the desert, very controlled operation, limited number of people in the know to get all the key components in place to do it. That is a filter of the number of people who could possibly leak the truth if it was faked. And it's definitely fakeable. So if you just think about it, how many people are involved in this project in total versus how many know it's fake? It's got to be a huge disparity. Again, I want to point out though, anyone who kneels to the mushroom cloud is on Team New World Order because it's their main god. Next to Angry Gaia, I would say the mushroom cloud is like their next. I guess maybe Gaia's the female, maybe the nuke is the male. But you have these angry gods that they use to threaten the population. And if you're following a truther channel, that still respects the mushroom cloud as a world annihilating weapon. Yeah, they're still believers in this other system. Like, they're not really in the truth. There's a point where you have to ask, is this person an agent or a dupe? And then the follow-up question, which one would you rather follow, an agent or a dupe? And what does that make you? Okay, continuing through your comments. Lean Dion says, the missing kids are now ingredients in the new Mountain Dew. That's probably going to come out very soon. Is there a Mountain Dew can with some kind of like adrenochrome reference on it? It wouldn't shock me. But the next Mountain Dew one is promoting something called Pitch Black. So they're kind of hinting at an upcoming blackout. That's the next thing coming down the line. Okay, we talked about the White House press room containing a figurine, what appears to be, or what is, a Trump effigy with the right side of the head beaten in. Insane that they would just have it sitting there. We talked about Joe Biggs, who's going to pretend to serve 17 years. Not a martyr. Look, if you really believe that stuff is real, and you really feel bad for Joe Biggs, you might want to tell him to talk to Woo's News. Like, hey man, you're going to go to jail for 17 years over a fake death. Ashley Babbitt's going to be there partying it up on Crisis Actor Island, drinking Coronas with Derek Western chauvinism and George Floyd. And you're going to be there rotting in a cell? No way. Biggs is an info warrior, and InfoWars is a huge part of the January 6th psyop. In fact, I don't think you can separate the two, just like you can't separate Jones from Waco, from Koresh, from McVeigh. This is a meme I found. Imagination is the portal to all realities. I agree with this. And when we talk about space, I think we're really talking about inner space. I think we're talking about mind control, not sending us to distant paradises on these other planets. I think back in the 20s or 30s, they used to say that Venus was covered in islands and they had dinosaurs. I'm pretty sure, like they used to. And now it's just gaseous or something. Like they really seem to be trying to dampen our enthusiasm for space travel. Here we go. Hunting Dinosaurs on Venus, Smithsonian Magazine. The Venetian Dinosaur Fallacy. It goes back to 1895. Venus was a real mystery before radio telescopes. Moonbats, Venetian dinosaurs. Now, moonbats might be fake, but there are moon dinosaurs, or at least dinosaur bones on the moon. And that's because of the impact of the, was it 66 million years ago? The big rock that killed the dinos actually splattered their guts and bones all over the moon, according to science. But anyway, imagination is the portal to all realities. I think what we're talking about here is the ability of the mind to form hypotheticals, to use reason, to be more selective about the realities that we opt into, about exercising individual will and perception. And I think what they do with the imagination is they want to box it in so you don't conceptualize things that you might act upon if those are things that they haven't already co-opted, if those are things that are out of reach. Like I've noticed that all science fiction reinforces all of the major propaganda programming. And it's because they want to keep your imaginations trained on their specific realities. They want you going through their portals. Daydreaming, for example, is frowned upon. And I think what we're talking about here is with mind control ultimately is about the will itself and how it's exercised, of course, by the use of the imaginative faculties. Visionaries, for example, requires a lot of free will and time, I guess, but this form of thinking that may go outside the box and may incite others to do the same. Seems like there's a lot of effort to control that. Try to get published or try to get a movie produced. If it's in the science fiction realm, if it doesn't assume from the starting point that the 20th century ended Gaia, that toxic masculinity and capitalism wasn't the death of man. No, they actually limit and constrain and shackle imaginations. And it's pretty clear to me that this mind war and info war, it's ultimately about that. This ties in quite a lot to the whole theme of X, with what Musk is doing, with the purposeful release of memes as some kind of threat to public health, to get the public to acquiesce to censorship for its own good. And I agree with Flynn about this upcoming potential black swan with the internet being shut down for some time, but I don't think it's going to be like an infrastructure thing. I think it'll be more like maybe a sudden need to quarantine the internet because of a specific thing or meme or something that could be, and it's yet to be determined what it could be, but I have some hypotheticals. Remember what happened at Christchurch? A video leaked of the first person point of view of the shooting up of a mosque. That video was suppressed, and anybody that had it was supposedly going to be arrested, and they shut down a lot of websites. They quarantined the internet to prevent the spread of that specific meme, and they did so very effectively. And I'm thinking maybe Christchurch was simply a dry run for what they're going to do, quote, globally to the entire internet. I'm not sure what type of content would precipitate that, but I have some ideas. Portal Complex says Wayfair Maui Kid Closet, $599. I mentioned Tim Ballard a minute ago, how if there were really missing children, he would obviously be over there rescuing them. And I'm reminded of the fact that while Jim Caviezel was promulgating QAnon conspiracy theories about adrenochrome consumption among the elite, Tim Ballard was actually pushing Wayfair conspiracy theories about how Wayfair transports children under the guise of furniture with exorbitant prices. Like you're talking about $50,000 filing cabinets and there's a child inside. And you know this because you shop at Wayfair, like Ellen DeGeneres, and you know it's a code. Yeah, I'll take the filing cabinet named Brenda for 66,000, please. And then presumably you get some child with it. Yeah, it sounds absurd, but Tim Ballard was saying it was true. And in his movie Sound of Freedom, they had these barges that had those big crates that Wayfair uses, that Wayfair conspiracy theorists were actually saying was were being used for transporting children. I think they made the movie Sound of Freedom to bolster the credibility of QAnon's claims. I think that's really the entire purpose of it. And that as a propaganda piece, it would have been effective had they released it on time. But I think the 5-year delay kind of killed the effectiveness of it. And that's why they gave up on those missing children. Like nobody cares about them anymore. That's why the Maui children thing is their next shiny thing. And, actually, I brought this up on Twitter, and someone said to me, how do you know that Tim Ballard isn't in Maui rescuing children? Maybe he just doesn't want to say it in public because it will compromise the integrity of the operation. So I'm thinking, wow, this person is willing to entertain the idea that hypothetically it's likely that Tim Ballard is in fact right now rescuing the Maui children. I'm like, yeah, let's just give him the benefit of the doubt. Based on what? Hopium, I guess. But I actually took it a step further, and I went to ChatGPT and I generated some fan fiction about Tim Ballard rescuing children in Maui, and I sent it to the person. They didn't write back. But I did it to make the point that what we're seeing is actually just a lot of fan fiction. And if you don't know what fanfic is, it's where there's some celebrity that you know of, and you imagine they're doing things that they're not, and you write about it, and other people find it entertaining, and then they write about it, and soon you have this body of fiction about these people where it's almost like an alternate reality, like a soap opera, but it's more of a do-it-yourself. And I've seen this phenomenon with JFK Jr., and I don't think it's a coincidence. If you look at the demographics, look at the age breakdown of the MAGAs, and then look at the age of JFK Jr., and I think that they're actually using the marketing tactic of sex appeal, and they're selling JFK Jr. to all these MAGA women, who are many of the influencers. And I think it's true because I've even seen them fawning over Juan O'Savin, Vincent Fuchsia, Negative 48. Any of these cult leaders that claim to be close to JFK Jr. basically got groupies. That's why when Negative 48 crashed on his motorcycle, I'm like, well, he had a good run those last few years. He lived like a rock star, basically living under this illusion that people bought into, that he was somehow connected to the JFK Jr. and the Q movement, and that he was going to be instrumental in this awakening. But yeah, totally an example of fan fiction run amok, where they're believing their own mythologies. Okay, let's continue. Jake the A-hole says, sounds like the same people who told me the Hawaii real estate guy is legit, and I'm a shill for suggesting he may be controlled. Yeah, look, if you ask me, nobody gets platformed or goes that viral if they're not shills, just on their own. Just from experience, you can't talk about certain things. You can't even delve into conspiracy without threatening your entire channel. It's just too gate kept. I find it very suspect. Let me play this clip. Oh, wait. Phase Polarizer claims, Vice. Yeah, Vice magazine said Ballard stepped away from Operation Underground Railroad. OUR. Yeah, his movement, Operation Underground Railroad, was the subject of the movie. I watched it. I reviewed it. There's a few things we could say about it. I think it's kind of interesting how it's got as one of its central props this pendant that has Timothy 6:11 on it. Timothy 6:11. And it was given to him by the rescued child. And supposedly this happened in real life. Well, does Tim 6:11 strike anybody here as significant in the QAnon story? In the way that they've turned the QAnon into this like white nationalist extremist thing in the minds of the left? It's the anniversary date of Timothy McVeigh's death at 33. 6/11. 6/11/2001, 33-year-old Tim McVeigh was martyred for the cause. So I think it's just interesting to note another Tim, a 6/11, and a movie that is being used to radicalize the Q movement, which is now, of course, following Trump, who launched his campaign at Waco, which inspired McVeigh, which led to his eventual death when he retaliated. So I don't think it's a minor prop. Now I have a clip here. This is an individual analyzing all of the different emblems from Space Force. And this is fascinating when you get into the story of the Antichrist and this war in heaven scenario. And I think there's a setup for this space war in heaven. Maybe it will be rods of God, tungsten rods, kinetic weapons. I doubt it. I doubt this ever goes, quote, kinetic and real. I think they just hire actors. But let me play this clip because this is pretty interesting. We were talking about the Space Force logos the other day, and there's this one, you turn it upside down, and it's like the Space Force craft now looks like a Baphomet head. And I was bringing up how, use the Force, Star Wars. A Force has to do with the willpower and the mind and mind control. So I've been saying that, Space Force, like NASA, like all the private space agencies, it's all about controlling your will, your mind. Space is code for the space between your ears. So again, here is an explanation and breakdown of Space Force's main symbols, and it's pretty much all apocalyptic.
About these Space Force logos. Are you kidding me? Here's number 13, lucky number 13. Revelation 13 talks about a beast rising from the sea. So we got Moloch coming out of the hole in the earth, probably the sea. Let's keep looking. We got the bear from Daniel 7, obviously, he's got a key. Bottomless pit? Probably. We got number 5, fifth seal. I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. Yeah, I guess the bear's got the key though. Let's keep going. Ooh, number 4, Illuminati eyeball. We got 2 lightning bolts. This is not Unit 666, believe it or not. Let's actually look at Unit 6 right now. Yeah, a 6-headed dragon.
Okay, now, Unit 6, you have a 6-headed dragon. One of the necks forms a 6. And then you have 6 claws. And that is a 6-sided polygon, a hexagon. All kinds of 666s in this one.
Dragon. Making a 6 with 6s all over the place. And a hexagon. Yeah.
Yeah, the music is unnecessary. It's very dramatic. Very interesting, though. This one, he turns the sun upside down, and he makes some interesting points about the abyss. And this is the key point I wanted to get to, where he's remarking on the Roman numeral 11. And we've noticed this one before. Like, look at the Roman numeral 9 and 11, put them together, and you can kind of form, when you put the X's together, the twin towers with the cube in the middle, as you'll see here. Watch what he does when he flips this XI. And I think it's relevant, though, to something that's coming.
Number 11. If you flip it upside down, it's a 9. Let's look at that. Whoa, looks quite a bit different from this angle, doesn't it? So here's a 9 over here. We got an upside down pentagram now. And that kind of doesn't look like a building anymore. It kind of looks like a pit. Is that a bottomless pit? Because you see the concave over here? Huh.
So here's where he references Revelation 9:11, the bottomless pit, Abaddon, which we can correlate with the Twin Towers, as we have been recently. And I do think that there's quite a lot here, all suggestive of the nuke having to be somehow connected with the destroyer in the abyss, a water-based attack coming from the sea. So this beast from the sea stuff, it's all connected here. And I do think it ultimately connects to Abaddon, the destroyer. And the word destroyer is used very emphatically in Oppenheimer. I am destroyer of worlds, or whatever he says. I've become death, destroyer of worlds. Well, and this is in reference to the Manhattan Project, and as they're detonating it, he says this, and I'm thinking, wait, Destroyer, Abaddon, the thing from the abyss, Abaddon. And you'll notice in the last few weeks they've been calling Trump a Don. And this reference to the king over the abyss does tie in to Revelation 13, the head wound, 13:3. It's all packed in there, and it all ties into Space Force. And I think what he ties it up with is that this is all somehow connected to some incoming war on heaven.
Revelation 9:11.
Yeah, this guy's soundtrack was pretty terrible. Pippi Langstruff remarks that, yeah, they actually stole that MP3 from her 2010 playlist. Lean Dion says store music is fucked. Yeah, it's pretty generic sounding. But that's what it takes in the attention economy. To hold people's attention, you've got to have that kind of a polish, I guess. I consume so much media that stuff I'm just sort of inoculated. I don't even notice it. Okay, let me scroll through my Twitter feed of late. We talked about General Flynn and Alex Jones. They can't sleep at night. They're wrecks. Let me play this clip one more time. It starts off with Flynn talking about how he can't sleep at night because he's so busy fighting the deep state. And Alex Jones cuts him off to say that he even has a harder time sleeping because of all the things going on. So they're having a real nerve-wracking time.
That we all need, and like I say, is anxiety. I get anxious sometimes. I woke up this.
Okay, we're having some gremlins here in the feed. And I've tried live streaming on Twitter. Nobody shows up, but we may use it in the future. We'll see. It's got potential. Okay, here's General Flynn, virtue signaling about how he's truthing so hard he can't sleep at night. What's your problem? And Alex Jones doubles down.
This morning at about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I started reading and
me
writing.
Too. I woke
and
up at 3:15 and was just because I don't have the anxiety during the day. I wake up because my brain's working while I'm asleep. I went to bed about 10. I woke up at 3, and I was like, I've got to do something.
There's a sense of urgency that we all need, and like I say,
Anyway, we all need a sense of urgency, sure. I actually posit the opposite. I'm an inactivist. I believe that the conclusion or the response to the conclusions that we reach here should deactivate you. It should remove you from their worldview warfare. I'm a conscientious objector to the Psywar. Nothing's going to cause me to go pick a side and basically follow one Pied Piper or the other. I mean, they all lead to the same place. It's the political horseshoe. You can really choose between activism in one or the other extreme, or you can go into the dream world where it's just ignorance is bliss, or there's the off-world stage perspective, which is even more blissful than ignorance. Like knowing what's coming, having these spoiler alerts is not a source of agitation. I was listening to Donnie Darkin talking about the upcoming Trump thing, and they're talking about it like it's literally the end of the world because they believe that it is. I'm talking about it because I know it's just another major transformative psyop, and I prefer to be informed. Because that's really what this whole thing is about. Their power disparity is from a knowledge disparity, information power. And you'll notice whenever there's chaos, what happens? People wait around for information. That's the only thing that can calm them down, that can quell their fears. And the people who disseminate the information wait, they tease it out, they have a press conference when they have a captive audience. And I'm not part of their captive audience. Yeah, and Nicotramus remarks on this. I'm a conscientious objector to the Psywar. That's an important point because the people who say that we're wrong for calling it fake are actually part of it. They're complicit in it. And it does have its casualties. Mind war has its casualties. Even 2020, fake left, fake right, fake threats, whether it's biolab stuff or the scary Bill Gates scenarios. Yeah, that was all fake. But many of the consequences of it were definitely real, especially when it comes to quality of life. People who have no psychic defense against this thing. But that's just, that's the nature of this thing. I mean, at some point, you could say, well, it's not our fault for being born into a doomsday cult. but it is your responsibility to think your way out of it. Listen to this tweet here. This is from Susan Goss. I'm guessing she has a large channel. I'm going to check that first. Because generally when I see comments like this, it's usually an influencer. It's usually somebody big. She's got 3,600. Happy Mommy Patriot, here to share truth. She probably has some JFK Jr. erotic fanfic. She says, multi-pronged attack on Lahaina, Maui, and 5G. Reports suggest that prior to the Lahaina tragedy, chemtrails laced the sky with aluminum and barium nanoparticles. This poised the smart city to react to the 5G and the dew and the transformer bombs and the exploding power lines. The COVID vaccines were also laced with aluminum and barium and nanoparticles. So those people would have incinerated. Now, if it had been an EMP, their heads would have exploded, according to Flynn. This place was a beta test, she says, on the explosive vaccine effects, energy weapons, and 5G deployment. So 5G deployed around people who've been inundated with chemtrails laced with aluminum and barium and with their own, what is this here? Unbelievable. Their own smart city just caused them all to incinerate, like putting an aluminum foil ball in the microwave. It says when the chaos ensued, Maui was the black swan. This was the epicenter of a deep state attack on the 15th Space Surveillance Squadron of the Maui Space Surveillance Complex. This was a calculated attack aimed at crippling or dismantling the national security installation. The Space Force was months ahead in that they had been prepared and they moved their vital equipment and they left behind decoys. Many people may not understand that an attack on the Space Force is an attack on national security. This was posted by a Patrick Kennedy 777. There should be a label on here. Like, you know, when you were watching different news programs, used to say a dramatic reenactment. Like, even they give you some kind of a notice here. This is fake. They need to have some kind of postings on here that say, warning, fan fiction ahead. Because everything I'm seeing from these QAnon Kennedy worshippers is just fan fiction. That this was some kind of secret attack on a Space Force installation by the deep state, but luckily it was a decoy. I mean, I'm sorry, but this sounds like word salad. It almost sounds like they have some kind of collective mental illness or delusion going on in the Q circles. Who put something in the Kool-Aid? Who put menthol in the Kool-Aid? Linda Curtis says, I think boiled vinegar could have prevented the whole thing. Look at this. End Wokeness tweeted, Joe Biggs will spend the next 17 years behind bars for being in the Capitol for 20 minutes. He has a 6-year-old daughter and a mother with cancer. At the sentencing, he begged the judge to let him take his daughter to school. So here's Joe Biggs tugging at your heartstrings. If you really feel bad for him and his mom and his daughter, if you really feel bad for Joe Biggs and you think he's a good guy that got caught up in something and he's a war hero and all this other stuff, then you need to get in touch with his representation and say, hey, look, your client was really served an injustice here because the whole thing was a psyop. There's got to be a psyop defense. Is there one? Is there a psyop defense? Well, judge, it was a psyop. That kind of means that if it wasn't an insurrection, if it wasn't a crime, then what can he be convicted of? Free Joe Biggs. You know, I actually made the same argument for Nick Cruz. Remember the Free Nick Cruz movement that didn't take off? I even designed some Free Nick Cruz ugly Christmas sweaters, and nobody bought them. But the whole point of it was he had an alibi, and nobody cared. But if he was capable of accessing our research and maybe presenting it to the judge, he could say, hey, if nobody died, if David Hogg's an actor, you can't lock me up. But it all makes sense when you realize that Nick Cruz is not a patsy. He's an actor. Never went to jail. What makes you think that Joe Biggs would go to jail as a patsy for 17 years? in an event that was fake. Obviously, he wouldn't. By the way, speaking of krakens and 33-foot octopi, here we have the Loch Ness Monster. Pictured new Loch Ness Monster sighting. Kai Kelly, who took the photo in 2018, feared ridicule at the time but decided to go public after a high-profile search last weekend. So here's a picture of the Loch Ness Monster. Here's the Illuminati playing card, which has as good of a record as The Simpsons for predicting future events. I'm looking at it and I'm thinking maybe this is where some of the PPE ended up. 57 tons of personal protective equipment thrown into the ocean, mostly by COVIDiots who believe in global warming. Just dumped it all in the ocean. COVID islands, islands of PPE and just waste, just kind of aggregates, and they actually form ecosystems. But here you do have what appears to be either the Loch Ness Monster or a whole lot of personal protective equipment. But Loch Ness Monster, I'm suggesting here, is likely a tie-in to this Kraken narrative. And by the way, on 11/3 of this year, it will be the 69th anniversary of Godzilla. Well, 69, that's the crab, that's Cancer, that's the Kraken. That's the sign we entered into on the date that the Titan submersible went under. The Titan submersible, a crab symbol. Godzilla, again, level 33 beneath the ocean. But the 69th anniversary of Godzilla, his birthday on 11/3, the Kraken Day, no less, the day that the One World Trade Tower opened, and it rose. You know, the whole idea of the towers fell and the new one rises up. Godzilla rising up on 11/3 for the latest in the Godzilla franchise, the 33rd by that company, the 37th in total. All of these numbers are specifically relevant to this sea-based attack by a nuclear weapon of some sort, whether it's the Poseidon or whatever they want to call it, the Satan 2. But Godzilla's 69th birthday on 11/3 is very significant in this regard. Okay, continuing. Skill says, I reside in the real world and lampoon idiot American psyops every chance I get. Yeah, this is basically film criticism in many ways. Criticizing the world stage is like being in Mystery Science Theater 3000, a captive audience forced to watch bad science fiction, which is designed to make you go crazy. And if you believe it, you're technically crazy. If you believe all their bad science fiction, you have had a schizophrenic break from reality. But you don't notice because everybody else had the same break. But you could say that the captive audience to the bad science fiction has driven the world crazy. Now, the ones who are sane in Mystery Science Theater 3000 are the ones who just laugh at it. They lampoon it. They throw popcorn at the screen. And that preserves their sanity. They riff off of the very bad science fiction. And I feel like we're in the same position, that we've been able to maintain our sense of sanity in an oasis of sorts from Plato's cave because we haven't taken it seriously. And you know, the captive audience, like Plato's cave, you can't leave. The idea of a captive audience is a key component to gaslighting and mind control. Just bringing that up. It's like a Kafkaesque dynamic that they set up. Okay, yesterday we debunked the Mandela effect. That'll be showing up in the archives from yesterday that I uploaded in case you missed it. I think we closed out talking about Kanye West being censored when they distracted him with Bianca Censori, an anagram for I censor. And having looked at it from the last couple of years, it's pretty clear that they silenced Ye. He hasn't even X'd / tweeted since he's been pacified with this character. He's been censoried. We talked about the pink goo that they sprayed all over Maui and how that connects to Barbie. And here's something I kind of glossed over. We talked about how Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell froze for 33 seconds And I was saying, I hope it's not a condition that's like getting worse. I hope it's just an act. And the last time he did it was for 19 seconds. So 19, 33. And then I noticed that he's posing here on his, right here on the podium right in front of him. He's behind a pyramid. Why does Mitch McConnell have an all-seeing eye pyramid in front of him as he freezes for 33 seconds after previously freezing for 19? I mean, I have a few guesses. But what is it with 1933 and that sign, that symbol? Lean Dion said, I actually did count McConnell. It was 33 seconds. Yeah, whenever the news says more than 30, it's their way of saying 33 because they can't say it because of us. Just like when they say 43. Yeah, 43 is the new 42. Just a heads up there. Here's a meme. It says, it's not possible to control you if you understand the game. Interesting point. Although the person who made this meme is likely still in the game because they're still pushing this Matrix stuff. And look, the Matrix is a useful but limited analogy here. The problem with it is that the red versus blue is a false dialectic, and red is no more awake than the woke are awake. These are alternatives for people who think too deeply about stuff and question too much. But these are guardrails. These are alternative beliefs that take you no closer to the truth. In fact, they take you deeper into the dream world. I'm a dream world refusenik. Like, I refuse to accept any faulty premise that's going to have me taking some leap of faith that gets me to swallow something that really, like I said, puts you on this fictional universe, in this world stage. But when I say fictional universe, it's like it matters that somebody still believes in fake nukes. It actually changes their entire perspective. And when you remove that from the equation, it kind of, again, undermines the importance of even following political leaders, because what are they trying to save you from? And if these things don't exist, then they're dupes or they're agents. But more importantly, it would seem that they need you to believe these things because that's what keeps you in line. So it would suggest that all political leadership that doesn't debunk the Psywar is, by all definition, controlled opposition. Now, this is an example, going back to the fake dead kids thing. I saw this meme posted that had all of the tweets from Parkland put onto a big poster. Like, I'm so scared, someone just got shot, police scanners, this person has no pulse, stay where you are. And this person is being lauded as a great visionary and artist because she put all these tweets together on a poster, reflecting a moment of time where all these children were sitting under their desks, ducking and covering, waiting for the bowl cut to come in and possibly kill them. And my response to this, and the person who posted it is published somewhere, and let me see what they go. Here it is. The Daily Tar Heel. It's the front page. She made the front page of the Daily Tar Heel. She said, and they've been printing news since the 1890s, so it's a big paper. They've been around for a long time. She said, I shed many tears while typing up these heart-wrenching text messages sent by these students. Oh, this is from UNC. Our campus was on lockdown for more than 3 hours. I am beyond proud of this cover and the team behind it. So she is very proud of the work of her team, aggregating all the tweets from these students under lockdown and then putting it on a poster. And she's letting us know that she cried, that if this wasn't digital, if this was typed on her typewriter, it would have watermarks on it. It would have tear stains on it. But because it's digital, it doesn't. So just imagine this thing is covered in tears because this gun control advocate is taking their tweets and then putting them onto this page for dramatic effect. And this is when I said, I think it's disgusting and exploitative. It seems there's nothing leftists love more than a pile of dead kids to grandstand upon. And I said, fake dead kids' lives don't matter, and the person resorted to expletives. I'm not going to read what they wrote, but I'm not making a lot of friends on Twitter. In fact, I have a few more bans and blocks under my belt here. I got blocked by a big truther channel, Broderick, I believe. Okay, let's see. I'm going to go ahead and schedule for Monday. If you want to mark your calendars, we will be live at 2 p.m. Mountain Time, and there will be a crew here from the documentary team, and they want to be here for a live stream. And so I'm going to make sure I send out live stream notifications, and it will be open phones. And any of the content during that call could end up in, B-roll for this documentary. But I sense that they're somewhat incredulous that there's a large group of people that talk about this stuff, believe this stuff, or rather think about these things. They find it to be kind of incredible. And they talk to, you see these news reports all the time. They show you a flat earther, a conspiracy theorist. It's usually just one or a small group. They've done conferences here and there. But I think it'll be kind of new for them to see the active think tank, and that this is actually a ongoing, years-long conversation that is more expansive than just the shape of the world, and actually goes into the role of media itself, the way that we perceive this place, how it's been rendered into a de facto simulation because we've tolerated so many augmentations just by basically laziness, or what I've been referring to as mind aids, which is what happens when people no longer have mental immune systems and are just there to catch any mind virus that passes their awareness. So we'll get into all these topics because, again, it's about worldview, not shape. But if we're being honest about it, you've only ever seen, felt, and experienced flat and stationary. If you say anything otherwise, you are a pervert. Anyway, thanks for joining. This is Chief Crow, Auto Hoax. I'll put a link in the description to the video to all the tracks that we play here.
I'm on Auto Hoax and it feels so good. You just auto believe everything like I knew that you would. In my dream, you know I ain't got time, baby, for another crisis actor with soulless eyes.
My buddy, my buddy and me.
Telecommunications Act of 1996.
96, y'all.
Gonna filter your eyes and scrub your mind. The weatherman, he's just another bad joke. You can be a doomed little donkey like Eeyore. I'ma be an auto hoax. Auto hoax, and it feels so good. You just auto believe everything like I knew that you would. Like I knew that you would. In my dream, you know I ain't got time. Ain't got time, baby, for another crisis.